When it feels scary to jump in, that's exactly when you jump. Otherwise, you end up staying in the same place your whole life. There is a moment before every important change where the mind becomes loud. You start imagining mistakes, embarrassment, failure, and uncertainty. You tell yourself you need more preparation, more confidence, or a better time. It feels responsible to wait, but often it is only fear wearing the voice of logic. The longer you wait, the more convincing that voice becomes, and the smaller your actions become. Most people do not stay stuck because they lack ability. They stay stuck because they wait for fear to disappear first. But fear rarely disappears before action. It weakens after movement, not before it. This audiobook explains a simple pattern. Progress begins at the exact point where comfort ends. When you step forward while uncertain, your mind slowly learns that action is safer than avoidance, and your life begins to move in a new direction. Chapter 1. Why fear appears before growth. Fear often arrives at the exact moment your life is about to expand. The mind interprets change as a possible loss of safety, even when the change is positive. When you think about starting something new, your brain does not first calculate opportunity, it first calculates risk. It asks what could go wrong, how you could fail, and how uncomfortable you might feel. This reaction is not a weakness in your personality, it is a protective mechanism. Your brain is designed to keep you alive, not to make you fulfilled. Growth, however, always requires stepping into unfamiliar territory. Because unfamiliar situations cannot be predicted perfectly, the mind produces fear as a warning signal. The closer you get to a meaningful step, the louder that signal becomes. Ironically, this is why fear often appears strongest right before improvement. Many people misunderstand this moment. They think fear means they are unprepared, incapable, or not meant for the path. In reality, fear is often proof that the step matters. You rarely feel intense fear about actions that have no importance. The stronger the potential change, the stronger the internal resistance. Your mind prefers stability over progress because stability feels controllable. Even if your current situation is frustrating, it is at least familiar. The brain would rather keep a predictable discomfort than risk an unpredictable outcome. So it fills your thoughts with hesitation, questions, and imagined scenarios. Not because the future is dangerous, but because it is unknown. Growth begins exactly at this boundary where certainty ends. Think about any major improvement in life. A new career, speaking honestly, moving to a new environment, or starting a personal project. Before the action, the imagination becomes active. You picture embarrassment, rejection, or mistakes. The body responds physically. Your heart beats faster, your focus narrows, and your thoughts loop repeatedly. This is not evidence that you should stop. It is evidence that you are standing at the edge of change. The brain is attempting to pull you backward toward comfort, but comfort does not create expansion. Every meaningful skill, relationship, and achievement begins as something unfamiliar. Fear appears because your mind cannot yet see the successful version of you clearly. Action is what introduces that image to your brain. Once you move forward, something important happens. The mind gathers real information instead of imagined outcomes. Reality is usually less catastrophic than anticipation. You make mistakes, but you survive them. You feel discomfort, but it becomes manageable. Slowly, the brain updates its expectations. What once triggered anxiety becomes routine. This is why people who once feared speaking later teach confidently, and those who feared starting later manage responsibilities easily. They did not wait for fear to disappear. They acted, and their mind adapted afterward. Fear comes before growth, because growth requires entering territory the brain has never mapped before. So the presence of fear should not automatically stop you. Instead, it should invite awareness. Ask yourself whether the fear is protecting you from real harm or from temporary discomfort. Most of the time, it is the second. The mind confuses unfamiliarity with danger. When you understand this, the feeling changes meaning. Fear becomes a signal that you are approaching development. The point where you feel uncertain is often the point where your next ability is waiting. Growth does not happen inside certainty. It happens when you act, while your hands are slightly shaking and your thoughts are not fully calm. The fear is not blocking your progress, it is standing at the entrance of it. Chapter 2. The mind protects the familiar. The mind is not designed to search for the best life. It is designed to preserve the known life. Even when your situation feels limiting, your brain quietly labels it as safe because it understands it. You know the patterns, the reactions, the outcomes, and the daily rhythm. There is comfort in predictability. So when you think about changing direction, your mind does not measure possibility, it measures uncertainty. It remembers past embarrassment more easily than future success. It reminds you of the last time something did not work, not the times you adapted and learned. This is why you hesitate even when you want to move forward. The familiar becomes a psychological shelter. You may complain about your circumstances, yet still remain inside them, because the mind chooses a known discomfort over an unknown opportunity. The brain believes survival lives in repetition, so it pulls you back toward the same routines again and again. A young man once kept a notebook filled with ideas for a small business he wanted to start. Every evening he wrote plans, calculated costs, and imagined customers. Yet every morning he closed the notebook and went to the same job he disliked. He was not lazy, and he was not incapable. He simply trusted familiarity more than possibility. The predictable paycheck felt safer than the uncertain path, even though the job slowly drained his energy. His mind protected the routine because it had evidence of yesterday, while the future had no proof yet. Months turned into years, and his ideas became stories he told others rather than actions he lived. The mind convinced him he was being responsible, but in reality he was only staying comfortable. The familiar gave him stability, but it also quietly limited his growth. Your thoughts often create arguments that sound rational but are emotional at their core. You say you will begin when you have more confidence, more knowledge, or more time, but these conditions rarely arrive in advance. The mind uses logic as a shield to delay discomfort. It tells you preparation must come before action, when in truth preparation often comes through action. The familiar environment gives you the illusion of readiness, yet readiness is built only in movement. Because your brain prefers certainty, it postpones decisions by calling hesitation wisdom. You feel as if waiting is maturity, when sometimes waiting is only avoidance wearing a thoughtful voice. The mind does not intend to harm you. It simply wants to prevent unpredictable feelings. Unfortunately, meaningful progress always contains unpredictable feelings. Children demonstrate something adults slowly forget. A child learning to walk falls repeatedly, but does not question whether walking is meant for them. They do not analyze identity after each mistake. They simply stand again because the unfamiliar has not yet become frightening. Over time, as awareness grows, so does caution. Adults begin to attach self-worth to outcomes. Failure becomes personal rather than educational. The mind then protects reputation instead of development. You hesitate to try new things because you imagine how you might appear if you struggle. The familiar protects your image, even if it restricts your experience. The older you become, the more your mind wants certainty before movement. Yet life still requires experimentation. Growth asks you to return, in some ways, to the courage you once had without thinking. There is also emotional memory hidden inside your hesitation. At some point you experienced rejection, criticism, or embarrassment, and your brain stored that feeling carefully. Now, Whenever a similar situation appears, your mind activates protection. It is not responding to the present moment alone. It is responding to remembered pain. The familiar environment rarely triggers those old emotions, so your brain keeps you there. But the memory exaggerates the risk. The past discomfort becomes a forecast for the future, even though circumstances are different. Your mind is trying to prevent you from feeling that same sting again. Yet by avoiding it completely, you also avoid opportunities that never existed in the past. The familiar prevents repeated pain, but it also prevents new outcomes. Protection and limitation quietly become the same action. Imagine a person standing near the shoreline, watching the ocean for years but never stepping into it. They describe the waves, the sound, and the horizon in detail, yet they have never felt the water around their feet. The shore feels secure because it is solid and predictable. The ocean represents movement and uncertainty. The mind prefers the shore because it guarantees balance. But life happens in motion, not in observation. Eventually, the person realizes their knowledge is incomplete. Watching is not experiencing. The first step into the water feels cold and uncomfortable, yet also strangely alive. Nothing about the ocean changed, only their willingness did. The familiar land kept them steady, but it also kept them distant from a deeper understanding. Sometimes safety quietly separates you from participation. Routine itself is not the enemy. The danger appears when routine becomes a cage rather than a support. Healthy routines help you function, but rigid routines prevent adaptation. When you repeat the same patterns daily, your brain spends less energy thinking. This efficiency feels peaceful, but it can slowly reduce curiosity. You stop questioning whether your path still serves you. The mind loves automation because it requires no emotional risk. Yet opportunities rarely appear inside automatic living. They appear when you interrupt habit long enough to explore a new direction. The familiar tells you tomorrow should look like yesterday. Growth suggests tomorrow can look different. The tension between these two voices creates hesitation, and your decision determines which voice shapes your life. Sometimes people wait for motivation before changing anything. They expect a strong emotional push to break the familiar pattern. But motivation often arrives after engagement, not before it. The mind does not generate excitement for experiences it has never lived. It trusts evidence, and evidence comes only through action. When you begin something small, your brain collects new information. That information weakens resistance because it replaces imagination with reality. The familiar loses its power once the unknown becomes experienced. Many people feel relief after taking the first step, not because the task is easy, but because uncertainty is finally replaced by clarity. The mind relaxes when it understands what once felt mysterious. Action teaches faster than contemplation. There is also an identity attached to familiarity. You begin to believe you are the kind of person who lives a certain way. This belief becomes a boundary you rarely notice. You say, "This is just how I am," without realizing you are describing a habit, not a permanent nature. The mind protects identity as strongly as it protects safety. If you attempt something new, your brain worries it may contradict the person you believe yourself to be. Yet identity evolves only through new behavior. Each time you act differently, you introduce evidence that you can exist beyond your previous limits. The familiar keeps your story consistent, but growth expands the story. You are not breaking yourself by changing. You are discovering parts you have not practiced yet. Consider how a room feels after years without rearranging. Every object sits in a predictable place. You walk through it without looking, knowing exactly where everything stands. Then one day you move the furniture. At first you bump into corners and feel disoriented. The space is the same, yet your perception changes. Within days your mind adapts and the new layout becomes normal. Life functions the same way. The discomfort of change is temporary confusion, not lasting instability. The mind resists because it dislikes the adjustment period. But adaptation is one of your strongest abilities. You have changed many times before and eventually called each change normal. The familiar is simply what you have practiced long enough, not what you are limited to. A woman once wanted to speak honestly with her family about a decision she had postponed for years. She rehearsed conversations silently, imagining arguments and disappointment. Each day she delayed, telling herself she needed the perfect moment. Eventually she spoke, her voice shaking. The conversation was not easy, but it was real. Afterwards she felt lighter, not because everything was solved, but because the fear had been faced. The familiar silence had protected temporary peace, yet it had also held tension inside her. When she broke the pattern, the mind learned that honesty did not destroy her world. Often the familiar keeps you comfortable externally while making you restless internally. Action reverses that relationship. The mind protects the familiar because it equates repetition with security. But security built on avoidance is fragile. True confidence forms when you realize you can enter unfamiliar spaces and remain steady. You do not become fearless, you become adaptable. Each step beyond routine teaches your brain that change is survivable. The familiar will always exist, and it can still support you, but it should not confine you. When you understand this, hesitation loses authority. You begin to see fear not as a stop sign, but as the doorway to experience. The mind wanted to keep you safe in yesterday, yet your life is waiting in tomorrow. Chapter 3. Waiting strengthens doubt. Many people believe time automatically solves hesitation, but delay often feeds it. When you postpone a decision, your mind does not become clearer, it becomes busier. Each day of waiting gives your imagination more hours to rehearse negative possibilities. You replay conversations that have not happened and mistakes that have not occurred. Because nothing real interrupts these thoughts, they begin to feel factual. The brain mistakes repetition for truth. What started as a small uncertainty becomes a heavy conclusion simply because you thought about it long enough. Waiting feels calm on the surface. Yet internally your confidence weakens. You are not resting, you are reinforcing doubt. Action provides evidence, but delay provides speculation. Without real experience to challenge fear, your mind slowly constructs a story where failure seems almost certain, even though nothing has actually taken place. A student once wanted to apply for a program that required an interview. He filled out half the application, then stopped. He told himself he would complete it after preparing more. Each week he delayed, convincing himself he needed better answers. Months passed, and he began imagining the interviewer judging his words, noticing his nervousness, and rejecting him immediately. Eventually he never applied at all. The strange part was that no rejection ever occurred. The doubt he feared was created entirely during waiting. By avoiding the situation, he gave his imagination unlimited power. Had he applied early, he might have stumbled, learned, and improved. Instead, the opportunity ended quietly, not because he failed, but because he never allowed reality to replace assumption. The mind seeks certainty, and when it cannot find it, it invents it. During waiting, the brain fills empty space with predictions. Unfortunately, it prefers protective predictions rather than hopeful ones. It prepares you for embarrassment, so you will avoid it. Each day you delay, the imagined difficulty grows larger. A simple conversation becomes a confrontation in your thoughts. A small project becomes overwhelming in your imagination. The task itself does not change, but your mental picture does. By the time you consider acting again, the step feels far bigger than it originally was. Waiting stretches the perceived distance between you and your goal. The longer you pause, the more intimidating the beginning appears. Doubt is rarely born strong. It gains strength through unchallenged thinking. There is a quiet cost to hesitation that most people overlook. While you wait, your attention stays fixed on the decision. You carry it mentally throughout your day. You think about it while working, resting, and even trying to relax. Because you have not acted, the mind cannot close the loop. It continues to analyze, compare, and predict. This constant mental activity drains energy. You begin to feel tired not from action, but from contemplation. The unfinished decision occupies space in your awareness. Instead of freeing you, waiting ties your focus to a future moment that never arrives. You are living in anticipation rather than participation. Action releases attention because it converts thought into experience. Waiting traps attention inside possibility. Some people believe waiting protects them from mistakes. They assume careful delay increases success. But in many situations, delay removes learning. Skill grows through attempts, not preparation alone. When you postpone action, you also postpone feedback. Without feedback, improvement cannot begin. Doubt grows precisely because you have no real information. The mind fears what it has never tested. Once you try, even imperfectly, the unknown becomes measurable. You see what actually happens instead of what you predicted. Often the reality is manageable. But by waiting, you deny your brain this correction. You stay afraid of something unproven. The fear becomes permanent because it is never examined. Action answers questions. Waiting multiplies them. Consider how a shadow appears at night. From a distance it looks large and threatening, but when you move closer you see it is created by a small object. Hesitation works the same way. From far away the task seems overwhelming. The longer you stand still, the larger it appears. The moment you approach, its size becomes accurate. Waiting keeps you at a distance, allowing imagination to exaggerate difficulty. Movement brings proportion. You discover the situation is not effortless, but it is workable. The mind relaxes once. Uncertainty is replaced by understanding. Many fears are shadows extended by inaction. They shrink when confronted directly. Waiting also affects identity. Each postponed action quietly communicates a message to yourself. You begin to believe you are someone who hesitates. This belief forms gradually through repetition. You remember the times you delayed more than the intentions you had. Confidence depends on self-trust, and self-trust grows when you follow through. When you repeatedly wait, your mind starts expecting you not to act. The next opportunity then feels even harder because your past behavior predicts avoidance. Doubt is not only about the situation, it becomes about you. Action, even small action, changes that pattern. Each completed step gives your mind new evidence about who you are becoming. A woman once wanted to start exercising but kept choosing the following Monday. Every week she planned carefully, yet each Monday she postponed again. Over time she stopped believing her own plans. The issue was not physical ability, it was the habit of delay. One day she decided to walk for just 10 minutes immediately instead of preparing perfectly. The walk was simple and imperfect, yet afterwards something important changed. She trusted herself slightly more. Her body had not transformed, but her relationship with her intention had. The doubt had weakened because she interrupted waiting with action. Consistency began not from motivation, but from breaking postponement once. There is a difference between thoughtful patience and avoidance. Patience occurs after effort when results need time. Avoidance occurs before effort when fear needs justification. Waiting can look wise externally, while internally it protects comfort. The challenge is honest recognition. Ask whether delay improves readiness or only delays discomfort. Often you already know the answer. The mind disguises fear with practical reasons, but the emotional signal remains. When the same decision returns repeatedly in your thoughts, it is usually requesting movement, not more analysis. Clarity often appears during action rather than before it. Opportunities also move while you wait. Circumstances change, people change, and timing changes. The chance that feels permanent today may not remain available. Waiting assumes the future will hold the same conditions, but life rarely pauses. Sometimes the greatest regret is not failure, but inaction. You remember the steps you never attempted more vividly than the attempts that did not work. Failure teaches and fades. Avoidance lingers because it contains unanswered possibilities. Doubt strengthens because it attaches to what might have been. Action closes that question, regardless of outcome. Even your emotions respond to movement. Anxiety thrives in stillness because the mind continues projecting. When you begin acting, your attention shifts outward. You focus on tasks instead of predictions. This reduces mental noise. The situation may still challenge you, but your thoughts become practical rather than hypothetical. You are dealing with reality instead of imagination. Waiting intensifies internal dialogue. Action organizes it. The nervousness you feared often transforms into concentration once you engage. You discover you are capable of responding moment by moment. Waiting promises comfort, yet delivers uncertainty. Action promises uncertainty, yet delivers understanding. Doubt grows in empty space where nothing interrupts thinking. The moment you move, that space fills with experience. You learn, adjust, and continue. You do not need absolute certainty to begin. You need willingness to replace imagined outcomes with real ones. The longer you wait, the more doubt becomes familiar. The sooner you act, the sooner clarity replaces it. Chapter 4. Action reduces anxiety. Anxiety lives most strongly in anticipation. Before an action, the mind tries to predict every outcome at once. It imagines conversations, reactions, and mistakes without any real feedback. Because these images are untested, they multiply quickly. The brain searches for certainty but finds only possibility, and that gap creates tension. You feel restless not because something bad is happening, but because nothing has happened yet. The mind cannot resolve uncertainty through thinking alone. It needs contact with reality. The moment you begin moving, the predictions start dissolving. Instead of many imagined futures, you face one actual moment. Your attention shifts from guessing to responding. The body calms slightly because it is no longer preparing for infinite outcomes. Action narrows the field of fear. The anxiety that seemed overwhelming before often becomes manageable once you are engaged in the situation itself. A woman once delayed making an important phone call for weeks. She rehearsed what she would say and imagined negative responses. Each day the call felt heavier. One morning, she finally dialed before allowing herself to overthink. Her hands trembled while the phone rang, yet once the conversation began, her thoughts organized naturally. The person on the other end responded calmly, and within minutes the issue was resolved. Afterward, she noticed something surprising. The anxiety she carried for weeks was far greater than the discomfort of the actual call. The fear had lived in imagination, not reality. By acting, she replaced 100 imagined scenarios with a single real experience. The mind relaxed because uncertainty ended. Action did not remove nervousness instantly, but it prevented the mind from feeding it endlessly. When you avoid something, your brain interprets avoidance as proof of danger. It learns that the situation must be threatening if you keep escaping it. This reinforces anxiety each time you delay. The brain strengthens the connection between the activity and fear. However, when you approach the same situation, a different learning occurs. Your mind gathers evidence that you can remain safe while uncomfortable. Even if the experience is imperfect, survival itself weakens fear. The brain updates its memory. It realizes discomfort does not equal harm. Repeated action gradually changes your emotional response. What once triggered intense anxiety begins to feel familiar. You are not forcing courage through emotion, you are teaching it through experience. The body also plays a role in this change. During anxiety, your body prepares for threat by increasing tension and alertness. When you start acting, that energy finds direction. Instead of circulating inside thoughts, it supports movement and focus. You begin concentrating on steps rather than sensations. The mind follows the body's activity. Breathing stabilizes, and attention becomes practical. You start solving small parts of the task. Each solved part gives immediate feedback that you can continue. Anxiety thrives on abstract possibilities. Action replaces abstraction with specific behavior. You are no longer preparing to act, you are acting. This shift alone reduces mental pressure. People often wait to feel calm before beginning, believing calmness will produce good performance. In reality, calmness often arrives after beginning. Confidence is not the cause of action but the result of it. When you perform a task once, your brain stores information. The next time, you enter with familiarity instead of mystery. Anxiety decreases because the situation now contains known elements. Even mistakes help because they provide clarity. You understand what to adjust. Waiting cannot provide this understanding. Only engagement can. The first step feels uncertain, but it creates a reference point. From that point forward, fear loses its complete control over your imagination. Consider someone learning to swim. Standing at the pool's edge creates tension. The water looks deep, and the body hesitates. The longer the person watches, the more intimidating it appears. Yet once they enter the water with guidance, they discover they can float. The fear does not vanish instantly, but it changes shape. The mind now deals with sensations rather than speculation. Movement teaches balance and breathing. After several attempts, what once caused panic becomes manageable. The water itself did not change. The experience changed. Action transformed a frightening idea into a learnable skill. Anxiety decreased because the unknown became understood. Another important shift occurs in attention. Anxiety directs focus toward yourself, how you appear, how you might fail, and what others think. Action redirects focus toward the task, what needs to be done next. When you are solving a real problem, your awareness leaves excessive self-monitoring. You start interacting with reality rather than evaluating yourself. This outward focus reduces mental noise. Instead of judging your performance moment by moment, you participate. Participation naturally quiets anxiety because your mind becomes occupied with purpose. The fear of how you look fades when you concentrate on what you are doing. Even small actions carry this effect. Writing a single sentence, sending one message, or practicing for 10 minutes interrupts the cycle of rumination. The task does not need to be large. It needs to be real. Your brain recognizes the difference between planning and doing. Planning keeps the decision open. Doing closes the gap between intention and behavior. Each closed gap strengthens a sense of control. You realize you can influence events through effort. This realization reduces helplessness, which is a core component of anxiety. You may still feel nervous, but you no longer feel trapped in thought alone. There is also relief in completion. Unfinished tasks linger mentally because the mind keeps them active. Once you complete even part of the action, your brain releases attention. You experience a quiet satisfaction unrelated to perfection. You acted despite uncertainty. That memory becomes a reference for future challenges. The next time anxiety appears, you remember you managed before. This memory weakens the initial intensity of fear. Experience becomes your reassurance, instead of imagination becoming your warning. Over time, your relationship with anxiety changes. It becomes a temporary sensation rather than a controlling force. Many people discover that the hardest moment is the beginning. Before starting, the mind gathers reasons to avoid. After starting, the process becomes clearer. You move step by step instead of confronting the entire future at once. The brain handles immediate reality better than distant possibility. When you break a large challenge into present actions, the emotional load decreases. You focus only on the next movement. Each step confirms you are capable of continuing. Momentum forms, and anxiety loses its overwhelming character. The paradox is simple. Waiting feels safe, but prolongs anxiety, while action feels risky but shortens it. Avoidance stretches fear across time. Engagement compresses it into a moment you can manage. The discomfort you face directly often lasts minutes, while the discomfort you avoid can last weeks. Action does not promise ease, but it offers resolution. You move from wondering to knowing. Knowledge, even imperfect knowledge, calms the mind more than endless speculation. By acting, you teach your brain a new association. Instead of linking effort with threat, it links effort with progress. Each experience becomes evidence that you can function while uncertain. Anxiety may still appear before new situations, but it no longer dominates your decisions. You recognize it as a signal of importance rather than a command to retreat. Action does not eliminate fear completely. It places fear in proportion. You begin to trust movement more than hesitation, and your life becomes guided by participation instead of anticipation. Chapter 5. Confidence comes after experience. People often believe confidence is a feeling you must possess before you begin. They imagine confident individuals wake up certain, prepared, and unafraid. In reality, confidence is rarely present at the start. It forms gradually through contact with real situations. Before your first attempt, the mind has no proof you can manage the task, so it produces hesitation. You interpret this hesitation as a lack of ability, but it is actually a lack of experience. The brain does not trust what it has never practiced. It protects you by questioning your readiness. Only action provides evidence. When you engage with a task and survive it, even imperfectly, your mind stores a new reference. Confidence is simply memory combined with repetition. It grows from what you have done, not from what you have imagined. Waiting for confidence before acting keeps you standing outside the very process that creates it. A young teacher once stood outside a classroom on the first day of work. She had studied for years, read books, and prepared notes carefully. Yet as she held the door handle, doubt filled her thoughts. She felt unqualified and feared losing control of the class. The moment she began speaking, her voice shook. Students noticed her nervousness, but they also listened. By the end of the lesson, she had not been perfect, yet she had taught. The next day she entered again, still uncertain but slightly steadier. Weeks later, she spoke naturally. Her confidence did not arrive overnight. It arrived through repeated presence. What changed was not her knowledge, but her familiarity with the experience. She learned that competence develops through participation, not preparation alone. The mind trusts evidence more than intention. You may intend to succeed, but until your brain sees you functioning in the situation, it remains cautious. After one attempt, your mind adjusts slightly. After several attempts, the adjustment becomes belief. You realize mistakes do not destroy you, and discomfort does not last forever. Confidence is not the absence of nervousness. It is the recognition that nervousness does not prevent performance. Each experience teaches your brain that uncertainty is survivable. This lesson becomes internal reassurance. Instead of asking whether you can do it, your mind begins asking how to do it better. The question shifts from possibility to improvement, and that shift is the beginning of real confidence. Children reveal this pattern clearly. When a child rides a bicycle for the first time, they wobble and fall. They do not interpret the fall as proof they cannot ride. They treat it as part of learning. With each attempt, their balance improves. Eventually, they ride without thinking about it. The confidence they display later comes entirely from repeated experience. No amount of watching others could have given them the same certainty. Adults often reverse this process. They wait for certainty before beginning. But certainty only comes after the action has been repeated enough times to become familiar. Confidence is not a prerequisite for action, it is a consequence. Another important truth is that confidence often grows quietly. You may not notice it forming day by day. One moment you realize you are performing something that once intimidated you. You speak more easily, decide more quickly, and recover faster from mistakes. The fear that once occupied your thoughts no longer dominates them. This change does not come from a single success. It comes from accumulated attempts. Each small experience adds to a foundation your mind relies upon. Confidence is built like a structure, one action placed upon another. The more often you engage, the stronger it becomes. Without these experiences, confidence has no material to stand on. A man once avoided public speaking for years. He believed he needed more knowledge before presenting. Eventually, he agreed to speak briefly at a small gathering. His presentation was uneven, and he forgot parts of his notes. Yet the audience responded kindly, and he finished. That single experience changed his perception. He learned the fear was greater than the event. He spoke again, then again. Months later, he addressed larger groups. The transformation did not occur because he suddenly became fearless. It occurred because he gathered evidence. Each talk showed him he could continue despite imperfections. Confidence emerged, not from success alone, but from persistence. Preparation has value, but it has limits. You can study instructions, watch examples, and rehearse mentally, yet certain understanding appears only in practice. Real situations contain variables that preparation cannot simulate. When you face them directly, your brain adapts. This adaptation is what produces genuine confidence. You stop relying solely on theory and begin relying on experience. The difference is subtle but powerful. Instead of hoping you will manage, you remember that you have managed before. Memory becomes support. It steadies you in future attempts. It is also important to see that confidence includes acceptance of mistakes. Early attempts rarely look perfect. When you act repeatedly, you become less disturbed by errors. You treat them as information instead of failure. This attitude frees you from excessive pressure. You focus on progress rather than performance. The mind relaxes because it no longer demands flawless outcomes. As tension decreases, performance often improves naturally. Confidence grows because you allow yourself to learn in public, not only in private preparation. People sometimes compare themselves to experienced individuals and feel discouraged. They see ease and assume those people began with it. They do not see the early uncertainty hidden in the past. Every skilled person once felt inexperienced. Their present confidence reflects accumulated experience, not innate certainty. When you understand this, comparison becomes less discouraging. You recognize that you are witnessing the later stage of a long process. Your own beginning feels uncomfortable because it is a beginning, not because you are incapable. Confidence requires time spent practicing, not merely thinking. Repeated exposure changes emotional reactions. The first attempt feels intense because your brain treats it as unfamiliar. After several repetitions, your emotional response decreases. The task becomes part of your routine rather than an exception. Familiarity reduces tension. You may still care about the outcome, but you are not overwhelmed by anticipation. Confidence grows when your body learns the situation is manageable. The nervous energy transforms into focused attention. You remain alert but not paralyzed. Another subtle change occurs in decision-making. Before experience, you hesitate because you cannot predict your response. After experience, you trust your ability to adapt. You know you can respond, even if events differ from your plan. This trust is confidence. It is not certainty about outcomes, but certainty about your capacity to handle them. You stop waiting for perfect conditions because you believe you can function in imperfect ones. Experience teaches flexibility, and flexibility strengthens self-belief. Confidence, therefore, follows a simple order. First comes action, then familiarity, then belief. When you reverse this order and wait for belief before action, you remain stuck. Each attempt you make contributes to a growing internal assurance. The mind stops asking whether you should begin and starts asking what the next step is. Confidence becomes quiet rather than dramatic. It appears as steady behavior rather than bold emotion. You act because you have Chapter 6. Small risks build courage. Courage is often imagined as a sudden dramatic act, but in real life it grows from ordinary moments. Most people do not wake up fearless. They become brave by practicing small risks repeatedly. A small risk may be speaking honestly, trying a new skill, or entering a conversation you once avoided. These actions seem minor, yet they reshape how your mind interprets uncertainty. Each time you step slightly beyond comfort, your brain learns that discomfort does not equal danger. The nervousness you feel before the action gradually loses its authority. Courage forms quietly because it is built from memory. You remember surviving the previous step, and that memory supports the next one. The mind does not transform in a single decision. It changes through repeated contact with manageable challenges that slowly expand your range of confidence. A man once avoided sharing his ideas at work. He feared sounding foolish, so he remained silent during meetings. One day, he decided to offer a single short suggestion. His voice was hesitant, yet no one reacted negatively. The discussion continued normally. That small experience changed his expectations. The following week he spoke again, slightly longer. Months later he led discussions confidently. Nothing dramatic happened. He simply gathered evidence through small risks. Each attempt corrected the exaggerated fears his mind had created. He discovered courage did not appear before he spoke. It appeared because he spoke. The smallest step interrupted years of avoidance and opened a path his imagination alone never could. The mind treats avoided actions as dangerous because they remain unknown. Small risks introduce familiarity without overwhelming you. When a challenge is too large, the brain resists strongly. But when the step is manageable, your nervous system tolerates it. You begin learning within a safe range of discomfort. Each completed action updates your internal expectations. The next attempt feels slightly easier because it is no longer entirely new. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the reduction of fear through repeated exposure. By gradually increasing difficulty, you train your brain to stay steady while uncertain. Large changes often begin with modest movements that your mind can accept. Consider how people become comfortable with public speaking. They rarely begin with large audiences. They start with brief conversations, small groups, and short presentations. These experiences accumulate. The first time your heart races, but after several attempts, your focus shifts from yourself to your message. The environment becomes familiar. Your body recognizes the situation and relaxes sooner. Courage grows because your brain stops interpreting the experience as a threat. It recognizes a pattern you have handled before. Through repetition, what once felt intimidating becomes routine. The process is gradual, yet powerful. Small risks also reshape identity. When you act beyond hesitation, you begin seeing yourself differently. You no longer define yourself only by caution. You develop a memory of initiative. Each action becomes evidence that you can move forward despite uncertainty. Identity follows behavior. The more often you step forward, the more natural it feels to do so again. Courage then becomes part of your character, not because you declared it, but because you practiced it. You trust yourself slightly more after every attempt. That trust accumulates quietly and changes your choices in the future. There is wisdom in starting small. A tiny action performed consistently changes more than a large action attempted once. The mind adapts through repetition. By choosing manageable challenges, you maintain momentum. Momentum matters because it prevents hesitation from returning. When you act regularly, fear has less time to rebuild. Each step reinforces the last. Over time, you attempt things you once avoided entirely. You do not notice the transition because it occurs gradually. The mountain you feared becomes a path you walk piece by piece. A student afraid of asking questions in class decided to begin with a single sentence after each lesson. The first time felt uncomfortable, yet the teacher responded kindly. Soon the student asked during discussions, then participated in group debates. Eventually, presentations no longer felt impossible. The original fear did not vanish overnight. It weakened through small exposures. The student discovered that courage is learned behavior. Each small effort created familiarity, and familiarity reduced tension. The change was not dramatic, but it was lasting. Small risks also strengthen resilience. When you experience manageable difficulty, you learn to recover quickly. You realize mistakes are temporary. Instead of avoiding them, you correct them. This ability to adjust becomes more valuable than avoiding discomfort entirely. Courage grows because you know you can handle imperfect outcomes. You no longer require certainty to begin. You require only willingness to try. The mind relaxes when it trusts your adaptability. There is a psychological principle behind this. The brain records emotional outcomes. When you face a small challenge and nothing catastrophic occurs, the fear response decreases. Repeated experiences reinforce safety. Your nervous system recalibrates. Situations once associated with anxiety become neutral. Courage, therefore, becomes a learned emotional response. It is not personality alone. It is conditioned confidence developed through experience. Each manageable exposure changes how your body reacts to future challenges. Small risks also prevent regret. When you avoid action entirely, imagination fills the gap with questions about what might have happened. By acting, even modestly, you gain clarity. You replace speculation with knowledge. This clarity reduces mental tension. You feel engaged with your life rather than observing it. Courage grows because you participate instead of postponing. You begin to trust action more than hesitation. Eventually, the size of your risks increases naturally. What once seemed bold becomes normal, and new opportunities appear within reach. You are not forcing yourself into large leaps. You are stepping forward progressively. Each step prepares you for the next. Courage expands at a pace your mind can accept. The process feels steady rather than overwhelming. You are not chasing bravery, you are practicing it. In the end, courage is not built in a single heroic moment. It is built through many quiet decisions. Each small risk teaches your brain that life continues, even when you are uncertain. You discover that growth is not reserved for fearless people. It belongs to those willing to try repeatedly. Small risks reshape your perception of yourself and the world. Step by step, hesitation loses control, and you begin moving through life with calm determination. Progress often hides inside ordinary effort. People wait for a powerful moment of determination, yet real change appears during simple daily actions. When you continue a task after the excitement fades, you teach your mind reliability. Repetition creates stability. Each day you act, Even without strong motivation, your brain begins to trust your behavior. You no longer depend on mood to decide movement. Instead, movement becomes part of your identity. The mind relaxes because your actions become predictable to yourself. This quiet consistency builds inner strength. You feel less overwhelmed by challenges because you have practiced showing up repeatedly. Confidence grows not from intense emotion, but from dependable habits. What once required effort becomes natural, and your direction becomes clearer through regular engagement rather than occasional bursts of enthusiasm. There was a man who wanted to write a book, but kept waiting for long, uninterrupted hours. Weeks passed with no progress. One evening he chose to write for only 15 minutes. The result was small, yet he returned the next day. Soon the short sessions formed a pattern. After months, he held pages he once believed required perfect conditions. The important change was not time, it was persistence. By lowering the starting point, he overcame hesitation. His mind stopped treating the work as overwhelming. It became a normal part of his day. He realized that movement, even minimal, reduces resistance. Waiting for ideal circumstances had delayed him longer than difficulty ever would have. Small, consistent effort created something large without dramatic pressure. Your mind values evidence of continuation. When you repeat an action regularly, you strengthen belief in your ability to maintain direction. Doubt often appears when effort feels temporary. But when you act daily, your brain stops questioning whether you will begin again. This reduces internal conflict. You are no longer negotiating with yourself each morning. Decision becomes simpler because behavior is established. Consistency removes the emotional debate that drains energy. Instead of asking whether you should act, you simply continue. The habit itself carries you forward. Anxiety decreases because uncertainty about your own behavior disappears. You know what you will do, and that knowledge brings calm. Many people assume motivation leads to discipline. In practice, discipline often leads to motivation. When you begin despite reluctance, your attention engages with the task. Interest follows involvement. The mind rarely feels eager about what it has not started. Action awakens focus. As you continue, you notice progress, and progress generates encouragement. Motivation then appears not as a cause, but as a result. Waiting for inspiration keeps you inactive. Starting without inspiration creates it gradually. The brain responds to movement by organizing attention around purpose. Energy emerges because your effort gains direction. Consider someone learning a musical instrument. The early sounds are uneven and frustrating. If the person practices only when excited, improvement remains slow. But with daily short practice, fingers learn patterns and ears recognize harmony. Over time, the sounds improve, and enjoyment increases. The pleasure was not present at the beginning. It arrived after repetition. The learner did not wait for passion. They allowed practice to create it. The mind begins to associate the activity with growth instead of difficulty. Persistence transforms discomfort into familiarity. Routine also strengthens emotional stability. When you maintain regular effort, your mood becomes less dependent on external events. You develop a sense of internal order. Even during stressful days, the simple act of continuing your task restores balance. You feel grounded because one part of your life remains steady. This steadiness reduces overthinking. Instead of analyzing every feeling, you return to action. The mind gains relief from constant decision-making. You rely on established behavior rather than temporary emotion. Stability appears through repetition, not through perfect circumstances. A student preparing for an exam once tried to study only during long sessions. Each attempt felt exhausting, and avoidance followed. Eventually, the student studied briefly every evening. The material accumulated gradually, and anxiety decreased. By the time the exam arrived, familiarity replaced panic. The student did not become fearless overnight. Fear faded because preparation occurred regularly. Small daily effort replaced last-minute pressure. The mind remained calm because it trusted the work already done. The student learned that steady progress reduces future stress more effectively than intense, short effort. Another change occurs in how you view obstacles. When effort becomes routine, problems appear as part of the process rather than as interruptions. You expect difficulty occasionally, and this expectation prevents discouragement. Instead of interpreting challenges as failure, you treat them as adjustments. This perspective protects persistence. The mind remains patient because continuation matters more than perfection. You begin measuring success by consistency rather than immediate results. This shift removes unnecessary pressure and encourages steady growth. Consistency also develops patience. When progress is gradual, you learn to value small improvements. You notice subtle changes that once seemed insignificant. The mind becomes attentive rather than impatient. You stop comparing today's effort to distant goals and instead focus on present movement. This awareness makes work more sustainable. You experience satisfaction in the act itself, not only in outcomes. Patience protects motivation because it keeps expectations realistic. The process becomes meaningful, not merely the result. There was a runner who struggled to complete long distances. Instead of forcing intensity, the runner chose short, regular runs. Weeks later, endurance increased naturally. The body adapted quietly. What once required determination became comfortable. The runner realized progress rarely announces itself dramatically. It appears through accumulated days of effort. The improvement was undeniable, yet each day had seemed ordinary. Regularity achieved what occasional intensity could not. As repetition continues, your relationship with effort changes. You no longer see tasks as obstacles to overcome, but as parts of your daily rhythm. This reduces emotional resistance. You begin sooner and hesitate less. The mind accepts action as normal. Fear of consistency fades because experience proves continuation manageable. You gain confidence not from a single success but from ongoing participation. The future feels less uncertain because your behavior remains stable. In the end, growth depends less on dramatic decisions and more on steady continuation. Each day of action strengthens belief in your direction. You become someone who progresses through persistence rather than pressure. The quiet power of repetition shapes your life gradually. By continuing without waiting for perfect feeling, you build reliability within yourself. Over time, this reliability becomes confidence, and your path advances through calm, consistent effort. Chapter 7. Overthinking blocks opportunity. The mind has a powerful ability to imagine outcomes, but when this ability is uncontrolled, it becomes overthinking. Overthinking is not careful planning. It is repetitive analysis without movement. You review the same decision again and again, hoping certainty will appear through thought alone. Instead, your mind circles the same possibilities. Each review creates new doubts. The brain searches for a perfect prediction, yet life cannot be predicted completely. Because no final answer arrives, you delay action. Opportunities rarely remain open during endless analysis. They require timely response. While you examine every potential mistake, time quietly moves forward. Overthinking feels productive because your mind is active, but no real progress occurs. You are mentally busy yet physically still. The cost is not only delay, it is lost experience. You learn only when you participate, not when you repeatedly simulate life inside your thoughts. A man once considered moving to a new city for better work. He compared neighborhoods, salaries, weather, and possibilities for months. Each day he discovered a new factor to evaluate. He wanted certainty before deciding. Eventually the job offer expired. Nothing negative had happened, yet the chance disappeared. Later, he realized he was not waiting for information, but for reassurance that risk did not exist. That reassurance never came because no choice is without uncertainty. His analysis created the illusion of control, but it prevented decision. The opportunity required a step, not a perfect forecast. By the time he understood, he had gathered knowledge but gained no experience. His hesitation had protected him from immediate discomfort, yet it also protected him from potential growth. Overthinking strengthens fear because it gives imagination unlimited authority. The brain creates scenarios that feel real, despite never occurring. You imagine conversations in detail, including reactions and judgments, and your body responds emotionally. Your heart rate increases and tension appears, even though you are alone. The mind cannot easily distinguish imagined events from present ones. Repeated thought, therefore, produces repeated emotional reactions. This convinces you the situation is dangerous. In truth, you are reacting to possibilities, not realities. When you finally consider acting, the emotional weight feels overwhelming. The opportunity itself has not changed. Your perception of it has expanded. Overthinking enlarges the challenge far beyond its actual size. There is also a hidden assumption inside overthinking, the belief that a perfect decision exists. You attempt to calculate every variable so that no mistake occurs, but most decisions reveal their clarity only after action. You cannot gather certain knowledge about a future you have not entered. Waiting for absolute certainty keeps you suspended between options. You neither move forward nor release the thought. This mental suspension consumes attention. Instead of engaging with the present, you remain attached to a possibility. Opportunities often require responsiveness, not flawless reasoning. Action creates information, while overthinking delays it. By seeking the perfect step, you avoid the necessary first step. Consider how conversations work. When speaking with someone, you cannot script every response. If you try, you hesitate and miss natural flow. Interaction requires participation, not constant internal editing. The same principle applies to life decisions. Movement brings clarity. As you act, you adjust naturally. Overthinking attempts to solve living situations as if they were mathematical equations. But life involves changing conditions. You learn while engaged, not while observing from a distance. The person who participates gains understanding faster than the person who analyzes endlessly. The difference is not intelligence but willingness to experience uncertainty. A student once delayed submitting a project because he wanted it perfect. He revised repeatedly, finding small improvements each day. The deadline passed, and he submitted nothing. Another student submitted an imperfect project on time, received feedback, and improved in the next assignment. The second student progressed more, not because of higher ability, but because action allowed learning. Overthinking had trapped the first student in preparation. He confused refinement with progress. In reality, progress required exposure to real evaluation. Opportunity often favors those who act with imperfection over those who wait for perfection. Overthinking also reduces trust in your own judgment. The more you analyze, the more alternatives you discover. Each alternative introduces another possible regret. Soon, you doubt every choice. Instead of selecting and adapting, you remain undecided. This indecision creates internal tension. You feel responsible for predicting the future accurately, yet no one can predict outcomes completely. Confidence develops when you choose and respond, not when you delay endlessly. Trust grows through action. You learn that even imperfect decisions can be managed. Overthinking removes this learning because it prevents decision itself. There is a difference between thoughtful reflection and overthinking. Reflection occurs for a purpose, and ends with action. Overthinking repeats without resolution. Reflection simplifies. Overthinking complicates. You know you are overthinking when your thoughts return to the same point without progress. You seek reassurance but find new questions instead. The mind believes more analysis will produce certainty, but certainty belongs to experience. When you act, many questions answer themselves quickly. Without action, they multiply indefinitely. Opportunities rarely announce themselves repeatedly. They appear, require a response, and move on. The person who acts gains experience even if the outcome is imperfect. The person who hesitates keeps possibility but loses reality. Regret often comes not from wrong decisions but from avoided ones. Overthinking protects you from immediate discomfort but creates long-term wondering. You imagine how life might have changed if you had responded earlier. That unanswered question remains heavier than any temporary mistake would have been. Another effect of overthinking is mental fatigue. Continuous analysis drains attention and reduces clarity. You become tired without doing anything. Because the mind never resolves the issue, you carry it everywhere. Action, however, provides closure. Once you begin, the mental noise decreases. You focus on what is happening rather than what might happen. Energy returns because your thoughts align with behavior. Movement organizes attention in ways thinking alone cannot. A practical way to interrupt overthinking is to shorten the distance between decision and action. Choose a small step you can take immediately. Send a message, begin a draft, or initiate a conversation. The step does not solve everything, but it changes your mental state. You move from contemplation to participation. Your brain collects real feedback, and the imagined complexity decreases. Each small action weakens the habit of postponement. Overthinking blocks opportunity, not because you lack ability, but because you delay entry into experience. Life requires engagement, not perfect certainty. When you act despite incomplete knowledge, you allow reality to guide you. You adjust along the way. The mind gradually accepts uncertainty as normal rather than threatening. Opportunities then become accessible because you respond in time. You realize that clarity follows movement, and understanding grows through doing rather than endless thinking. Many decisions feel heavier than they truly are, because your mind keeps reopening them. You reconsider the same choice repeatedly, hoping a final answer will remove all risk. Instead, each reconsideration introduces another perspective. You search for a guarantee that does not exist. This constant reopening prevents commitment. Without commitment, you cannot move forward long enough to see results. The mind believes caution protects you, yet excessive caution freezes progress. You remain at the starting point, carefully thinking while others learn through movement. The difference is not intelligence or talent. It is willingness to tolerate uncertainty long enough for experience to teach you. When you finally choose and continue despite incomplete information, your thoughts quiet naturally. Not because every doubt vanished, but because action gave your attention, direction, and purpose beyond speculation. There was a woman who wanted to learn a new language, but kept researching the best method. She compared courses, teachers, and materials for months. Each option seemed imperfect, so she delayed starting. One day she simply began with a basic lesson online. The first session was confusing, yet she learned a few words. After several weeks, she could understand simple sentences. She realized progress required beginning, not selecting perfectly. Her research had given knowledge about learning, but only practice gave ability. Overthinking had postponed growth by focusing on preparation rather than participation. The moment she accepted imperfect beginnings, her learning accelerated. She discovered that improvement depends on engagement, not on finding the ideal starting point. Overthinking also disguises itself as responsibility. You feel careful and mature while analyzing every detail. But true responsibility includes responding to reality, not only imagining it. Planning has value, yet planning without action creates distance from life. The mind becomes comfortable with ideas and uncomfortable with execution. You feel productive because you have considered many possibilities, yet nothing changes externally. Opportunities respond to behavior. They appear more often when you interact with the world. Overthinking limits interaction, keeping you within mental boundaries. The longer you remain there, the harder it becomes to begin. Your mind grows accustomed to observation rather than participation. Perfectionism often feeds overthinking. You want the first step to look confident and correct. Because that expectation is unrealistic, you postpone. The beginning of any skill contains awkwardness. Accepting this reduces hesitation. When you allow early imperfection, you permit learning. Without this acceptance, you stay trapped in preparation. The fear of mistakes becomes greater than the desire to progress. Yet mistakes are temporary teachers. They provide immediate feedback that thought cannot provide. Overthinking tries to prevent error, but also prevents experience. You cannot refine what you never attempt. Growth requires visible effort, not hidden planning. The mind also exaggerates consequences. It imagines that a single wrong move will define everything. In reality, most actions carry manageable outcomes. You can adjust, apologize, or improve. The world rarely reacts as intensely as your thoughts predict. But until you act, you cannot witness this. Overthinking magnifies the importance of each decision. You treat ordinary steps as irreversible events. This pressure increases hesitation. Once you act, you see that situations remain flexible. Life continues, and you adapt. Understanding this weakens future overthinking because your brain gains evidence that recovery is possible. Sometimes, overthinking comes from fear of judgment. You imagine others noticing every mistake, yet most people are occupied with their own concerns. They rarely analyze you as intensely as you analyze yourself. By delaying action to avoid judgment, you create internal tension. When you finally participate, you notice reactions are brief and ordinary. The imagined audience fades. You realize you postponed experience for a reaction that hardly existed. This recognition frees attention. Instead of performing for imaginary observers, you focus on learning and improving. Action shifts your awareness from perception to participation. There is relief in deciding, even before results appear. Once you commit, your energy organizes around effort rather than doubt. Overthinking divides attention among alternatives. Decision gathers attention into one direction. You begin solving problems instead of imagining them. Your mind feels clearer because uncertainty decreases. You may still face challenges, but they are concrete. Concrete problems have solutions. Imagined problems multiply endlessly. Commitment, therefore, reduces mental weight. It replaces endless choice with purposeful movement. A musician once delayed performing publicly, convinced the performance must be flawless. Eventually, he played at a small event despite uncertainty. The performance contained errors, yet listeners appreciated it. Afterward, he felt lighter. He realized the pressure had existed mainly in anticipation. By acting, he transformed fear into experience. The next performance felt easier because the unknown was gone. Overthinking had magnified the event far beyond its reality. Action returned it to proportion. Another effect of overthinking is reduced creativity. When you evaluate every idea immediately, you prevent exploration. Creativity requires experimentation. Some ideas will fail, yet they lead to better ones. Overthinking stops this process before it begins. You judge possibilities before testing them. When you allow imperfect attempts, you discover unexpected solutions. Action opens paths thought alone cannot see. Experience reveals options imagination never predicted. Movement generates clarity that analysis cannot replace. Small deadlines help interrupt excessive thinking. When you give yourself limited time to decide, you prevent endless reconsideration. You accept that no decision contains complete certainty. Acting within a time frame encourages learning through feedback rather than speculation. The first step rarely determines the final outcome. It simply begins a path that can be adjusted. Overthinking treats decisions as permanent. Experience shows they are adaptable. You may notice that after acting, your mind becomes calmer even if the task remains unfinished. The uncertainty reduces because you have entered the process. You are no longer wondering how it will feel. You are discovering. Discovery replaces imagination. This shift reduces mental tension. Instead of asking endless questions, you answer them through involvement. Your confidence grows not from prediction, but from familiarity. Opportunities favor those who engage early. By starting, you position yourself where events occur. You meet people, learn skills, and notice directions unavailable to observers. Overthinking keeps you outside these interactions. Once you begin, you realize the path reveals itself gradually. Clarity follows steps, not thoughts alone. When you act despite incomplete certainty, you replace hesitation with experience, and experience becomes the teacher that thinking alone could never provide. Chapter 8. Imperfect action beats perfect delay. Perfection appears attractive because it promises safety. If you act perfectly, you imagine nothing will go wrong. Yet perfection belongs to imagination, not to beginnings. Every real action contains uncertainty. When you wait for flawless readiness, you postpone indefinitely because conditions never align completely. Imperfect action, however, creates movement. The first attempt rarely looks impressive, but it establishes direction. Direction matters more than appearance at the start. Once you begin, you learn what to adjust. Delay keeps you comfortable but unchanged. Action feels uncomfortable but productive. The difference lies in experience. Perfection delays experience, while imperfect effort produces it. Growth requires contact with reality, not with an ideal image. The sooner you accept that the first step will be incomplete, the sooner you enter the process that leads to improvement. A young artist once spent years planning a portfolio. She imagined the exact style and waited until she felt capable of matching it. Each drawing seemed inadequate, so she hid them. Eventually, she shared one unfinished sketch online. The response encouraged her to continue. With each drawing, she improved visibly. The skill she waited for appeared only after she displayed imperfect work. Her earlier delay had not protected her ability, it had prevented its development. By allowing flaws, she allowed learning. Imperfect action gave feedback, practice, and confidence. The quality she desired emerged gradually, not through waiting but through repetition. Perfect delay creates an illusion of progress. You prepare, organize, and imagine outcomes. You feel busy, yet nothing changes externally. This mental activity feels safe because no mistakes occur. However, absence of mistakes also means absence of growth. Mistakes are information. They show you where adjustment is needed. Without them, improvement has no direction. Imperfect action introduces feedback immediately. Even small effort teaches you more than long preparation. You discover real challenges rather than predicted ones. This knowledge shortens the distance to competence. Delay protects pride temporarily, but weakens development. Action risks embarrassment briefly, but strengthens ability permanently. There is also relief in accepting imperfection. When you release the need to appear flawless, pressure decreases. You allow yourself to learn publicly and adapt. Your focus shifts from avoiding error to gaining understanding. This shift increases persistence. You are no longer discouraged by small setbacks because you expected them. The mind relaxes when it knows mistakes are acceptable. Energy that once went into worry now goes into practice. Improvement accelerates because your attention stays on the task rather than on self-judgment. Imperfect effort sustains motivation better than perfectionism ever can. Consider a person learning to cook. The first meal may be uneven or poorly seasoned. If the person waits until certain of success, they never begin. But by cooking repeatedly, they recognize patterns, timing, temperature, and flavor balance. Each imperfect meal teaches something specific. Soon the dishes become enjoyable. Skill emerges through repeated attempts. Waiting would never produce this understanding. The kitchen rewards participation, not theory. Life functions similarly. Experience shapes ability faster than intention alone. Perfectionism also hides fear of evaluation. You delay because you fear how others might react, yet most improvement requires interaction. Feedback from real situations refines your approach. When you act imperfectly, you invite learning. When you delay, you avoid both criticism and growth. Over time, avoidance strengthens anxiety. Action reduces it because you realize reactions are manageable. Imperfect performance rarely causes the severe consequences you imagined. Reality softens exaggerated expectations. Another advantage of imperfect action is momentum. Once you start, continuation becomes easier. The hardest part is the beginning. Delay resets that beginning repeatedly. Each time you restart mentally, you face the same resistance. Imperfect action breaks this cycle. You move forward step by step. Momentum builds confidence because progress becomes visible. You notice improvement over days and weeks. This evidence encourages persistence. Without beginning, there is no progress to encourage you. A student once postponed studying until feeling fully prepared. Every day felt insufficient. Finally, the student reviewed one small topic imperfectly. The understanding was partial, yet it led to the next topic. Gradually, knowledge connected. By the exam date, the student felt ready, not because preparation was perfect, but because it was continuous. Waiting would have produced stress. Imperfect action produced familiarity. The mind trusted repeated exposure more than delayed certainty. Imperfect action also reveals realistic goals. When you engage directly, you see what is possible now and what requires time. You adjust expectations accordingly. Delay keeps goals abstract and often exaggerated. By acting, you refine your path. You stop chasing unrealistic outcomes and begin building achievable ones. This clarity improves focus. You direct effort effectively rather than imagining endless possibilities. Another change occurs in self-perception. When you act despite uncertainty, you see yourself as capable of initiative. This identity supports future decisions. You trust your ability to adapt rather than waiting for ideal conditions. Confidence forms from evidence of participation. Each attempt, even flawed, strengthens self-belief. You become less concerned with how the first step appears and more concerned with where it leads. Over time, the accumulation of imperfect actions creates competence. What once felt uncertain becomes routine. Skills sharpen, decisions quicken, and hesitation decreases. Observers may later call the result talent, but its origin was repeated effort. The path to mastery is paved with imperfect attempts, not perfect beginnings. Waiting for readiness would have kept the journey unrealized. In the end, imperfect action moves life forward, while perfect delay keeps it paused. Progress depends on engagement, not on flawless preparation. When you choose movement over waiting, you trade temporary discomfort for lasting development. Each step teaches, adjusts, and strengthens you. The imperfect beginning becomes the foundation of real improvement, and the life you imagined starts to take shape through continuous participation. A delayed beginning often feels harmless because nothing visibly goes wrong. Days pass calmly, routines remain steady, and you convince yourself there is still time. Yet beneath that calm, a quiet cost appears. The longer you wait, the more difficult starting becomes. Your mind grows attached to planning rather than doing. You think about the action so often that it becomes larger than it truly is. A simple step begins to feel like a major event. The imagination adds weight to the task, and hesitation strengthens. Imperfect action interrupts this process. The moment you begin, you discover the step is manageable. The mind relaxes because reality replaces exaggeration. Delay makes the future intimidating, but movement restores proportion. What seemed overwhelming becomes a series of small, manageable efforts, and progress finally starts. There was a young man who wanted to exercise, but kept designing the perfect routine. He studied schedules, equipment, and techniques for weeks. Each plan looked ideal on paper, yet he never began. One evening, he decided to walk for 10 minutes without preparation. The walk was ordinary, but afterward he felt accomplished. The next day he walked again, slightly longer. Gradually his energy improved. He realized the body needed activity, not theory. His earlier preparation had postponed health, while imperfect action restored it. The smallest movement changed more than months of planning. He learned that starting small creates momentum, and momentum creates consistency. Perfection often disguises fear of discomfort. You delay because beginning exposes you to uncertainty. Planning feels controlled, but action feels vulnerable. However, growth requires vulnerability. When you allow yourself to act imperfectly, you accept temporary unease in exchange for development. This acceptance strengthens resilience. You discover discomfort fades quickly once engagement begins. The mind adapts to activity faster than to anticipation. Waiting prolongs tension, while action shortens it. By choosing imperfect effort, you train yourself to tolerate uncertainty. That tolerance becomes courage in future situations. Another benefit of starting imperfectly is learning efficiency. Real feedback teaches faster than speculation. You may predict what will be difficult, yet the actual challenge is often different. Only participation reveals this. When you begin, you see what matters and what does not. You adjust your approach immediately. Delay prevents these corrections. You continue preparing for problems that may never occur. Imperfect action focuses your learning. It directs effort toward real obstacles instead of imagined ones. The time you feared wasting becomes valuable because it produces experience. A writer once waited for inspiration before drafting a story. Days passed with ideas, but no pages. One morning, the writer began writing without confidence. The sentences felt rough, yet they existed. After several days, the story developed shape. Inspiration followed effort, not the reverse. The act of writing created clarity. Waiting had produced only intention. By starting imperfectly, the writer discovered creativity lives inside action. Movement invites ideas that thinking alone cannot produce. Delay also weakens commitment. When you postpone repeatedly, your intention loses importance in your mind. You begin to doubt whether you truly care. Action renews commitment because it demonstrates priority. Even a small step signals seriousness to yourself. You see evidence of effort and feel motivated to continue. Each action strengthens connection to your goal. Delay gradually separates you from it. The distance grows until the goal feels unrealistic. Beginning closes that distance immediately. Imperfect beginnings also reduce fear of judgment. You realize most observers are less critical than your imagination suggested. People notice effort more than flaws. When you participate openly, you receive support and useful feedback. Waiting to appear perfect prevents these interactions. The world responds to presence, not to hidden preparation. By acting, you allow others to engage with your progress. Encouragement replaces imagined criticism. Consistency follows beginnings. Once you start, repetition becomes easier. The first step carries the greatest resistance because it breaks inertia. Afterward, continuation requires less energy. Imperfect action therefore solves two problems: hesitation and stagnation. You are no longer deciding whether to begin, you are deciding how to continue. The focus shifts from starting to improving. This change simplifies your thoughts and reduces internal conflict. There was a musician who avoided performing publicly until completely confident. Eventually he played at a small gathering despite uncertainty. He made mistakes, yet listeners appreciated the music. The experience changed his perspective. He learned that performance develops through performing. Each appearance improved his skill and comfort. His confidence did not precede action, it followed it. Imperfect playing created real progress. Another lesson emerges from experience. Improvement is gradual. You rarely notice it daily, but weeks later the difference is clear. Skills sharpen, reactions quicken, and anxiety decreases. None of this would occur without initial effort. Waiting preserves potential, but prevents transformation. Imperfect action converts potential into ability. The change feels natural because it happens through repetition. Even failure becomes useful after action. When you attempt something and it does not work, you gain specific information. You know what to change. Without action, you only have guesses. Failure, therefore, becomes a guide rather than a setback. Imperfect attempts reveal the path forward. Each correction moves you closer to competence. Delay offers no such guidance. In the end, progress favors participation. Perfect readiness is an idea, but real improvement is a process. By starting imperfectly, you allow life to respond. Each step teaches something new. The journey begins not when conditions are ideal, but when you decide to move. Through continued action, uncertainty becomes familiarity, and intention becomes achieve me. Chapter 9. Repetition removes fear. Fear feels strongest when an experience is new. The mind reacts intensely because it has no memory to compare with the present moment. Without reference, uncertainty grows larger than reality. Repetition changes this completely. Each time you repeat an action, your brain gathers evidence that you can remain steady while doing it. What once caused tension becomes familiar. The event itself does not become easier immediately, but your reaction softens. The mind recognizes patterns and relaxes. Fear thrives in unfamiliarity, yet familiarity grows only through repeated contact. Avoidance keeps the situation mysterious, but repetition reveals its true size. You begin to see details clearly instead of imagining them. This clarity reduces emotional exaggeration. Repetition does not erase challenge, but it removes unnecessary alarm, allowing you to act with calm attention instead of hesitation. A student who feared speaking in class once decided to answer one question every day. The first response felt uncomfortable. The second felt slightly easier. After several weeks, raising a hand became natural. The subject matter had not changed, but the emotional response had. Through repetition, the student's brain learned that nothing harmful followed participation. The fear lost its authority. The student discovered courage was not created by one brave moment, but by many ordinary ones. Each repetition rewrote expectation. Instead of predicting embarrassment, the mind predicted familiarity. Confidence followed quietly from accumulated attempts rather than sudden determination. The brain is designed to adapt. When you repeatedly encounter the same situation, your nervous system recalibrates. The heart no longer races as strongly, and your breathing steadies sooner. You stop preparing for danger because experience shows none appears. This biological adjustment is powerful. Fear once felt automatic, yet repetition teaches your body a different response. The reaction becomes measured instead of overwhelming. You realize the mind can learn emotional patterns just as it learns physical skills. Each exposure becomes a lesson that safety exists within participation. Consider how people become comfortable driving a car. The first time, every movement demands attention. Hands grip the wheel tightly, and small decisions feel critical. After many drives, the same actions feel effortless. The road did not change. Familiarity changed perception. Repetition organized the mind. What once required intense concentration now feels routine. Fear faded because understanding replaced uncertainty. Driving still requires awareness, yet anxiety no longer dominates. The brain trusts what it has practiced enough times. Repetition also reshapes imagination. Initially, your thoughts predict failure because no successful memory exists. After several attempts, your mind begins recalling moments when things went well. These memories influence expectation. Instead of fearing the next attempt, you approach it with recognition. You have been here before. This simple awareness weakens hesitation. You no longer see the situation as entirely unknown. Familiarity replaces speculation, and your attention shifts toward improvement rather than avoidance. There was a man who feared initiating conversations with strangers. He began by greeting one person each day. The exchanges were brief and ordinary. Soon he noticed people responded kindly. After months, conversations extended naturally. His fear had not vanished overnight. It dissolved gradually because repetition provided evidence. Each interaction corrected the exaggerated scenarios his mind once imagined. The act became part of his routine rather than an unusual challenge. Repetition also builds trust in yourself. You learn that nervousness does not prevent functioning. Even when discomfort appears, you know you can continue. This self-trust is essential. Fear weakens when you believe in your ability to handle it. Every repeated action confirms that belief. You stop waiting to feel fearless and begin acting despite feeling uncertain. The emotion remains manageable because experience proves your resilience. Another effect of repetition is improved focus. When an activity becomes familiar, your attention moves from self-consciousness to the task itself. You stop worrying about how you appear and start concentrating on what you are doing. Performance improves naturally because mental energy is no longer spent on fear. Repetition frees awareness from internal distraction and directs it outward toward purposeful action. Mistakes also lose power through repetition. The first mistake feels significant because it interrupts expectation. After many attempts, mistakes become information rather than judgment. You correct them quickly and continue. Fear of error decreases because you know recovery is possible. Experience teaches that imperfection is part of learning, not evidence of inability. This understanding encourages persistence. A musician once trembled before every performance. By performing frequently, the anticipation shortened. The stage became familiar territory. The same lights and audience no longer felt threatening. Repetition created emotional stability. The musician still cared deeply about the performance, but no longer felt paralyzed. Practice had prepared both skill and mind for participation. Over time, repetition creates a new baseline. What once required courage becomes normal behavior. You forget how intimidating the first attempt felt. This is not because you changed suddenly, but because you practiced consistently. Each repetition shaped your perception until fear lost its influence. The unknown became known through experience. In the end, repetition is a gentle teacher. It asks for persistence rather than perfection. By returning to the same action again and again, you transform anxiety into familiarity. Fear retreats when it cannot rely on uncertainty. What remains is steady confidence built from real encounters. You realize courage is not a single act, but a habit formed through repeated engagement with life. At first, repetition feels tiring because the mind still expects difficulty. You perform the same action again and again, and progress appears slow. Yet, beneath the surface, your brain is reorganizing its response. The situation becomes predictable. Predictability reduces emotional tension. You stop reacting strongly to every detail and begin responding calmly. What once demanded intense focus now requires simple attention. This change happens gradually, almost unnoticed. You do not suddenly feel fearless. You simply feel less alarmed. The absence of strong anxiety allows clearer thinking. You perform better because your mind is no longer occupied with avoiding imagined danger. Repetition turns reaction into routine. The task remains the same, but your internal experience transforms. A young employee once feared presenting ideas to colleagues. Each meeting created stress. Instead of avoiding, he volunteered to present small updates regularly. The first attempts were uncomfortable, but he continued. After several months, meetings felt ordinary. He noticed he could concentrate on explaining ideas rather than on his nervousness. The environment had not changed, familiarity had. Repetition replaced anticipation with experience. He learned that comfort follows exposure. By staying engaged long enough, the mind stopped treating the situation as unusual. Confidence appeared quietly through repeated participation. The brain relies on memory to interpret the present. When an event occurs repeatedly without harm, the memory becomes reassuring. Your mind references past experiences and reduces alertness. This is how fear fades naturally. It is not suppressed, it is outgrown. Each repetition updates your expectation. You begin entering situations with calm curiosity rather than protective tension. The emotional shift comes from accumulated evidence. You have proof that you can handle what once seemed threatening. Consider learning to swim in deep water. The first entry creates panic because your body senses unfamiliar conditions. With practice, you understand buoyancy and breathing. The water remains deep, yet you feel safe because you know how to respond. Repetition teaches coordination and trust in your ability. The fear was not in the water itself, but in uncertainty. Experience removed uncertainty, allowing relaxation within the same environment. Repetition also changes your perception of time. Initially, moments feel long because you are hyper-aware of discomfort. After many attempts, the same duration passes quickly. Your attention shifts outward toward activity instead of inward toward emotion. This shift makes the experience lighter. You stop counting minutes and start engaging naturally. The mind becomes present rather than defensive. Fear requires constant anticipation, but repetition reduces anticipation and increases familiarity. There was a writer who feared sharing work publicly. She posted a short piece once a week, despite hesitation. The first comments felt intense, but over time they became normal feedback. Her focus moved from worrying about reactions to improving her writing. Repetition turned evaluation into conversation. The emotional weight disappeared because the experience became expected rather than rare. Another change occurs in decision speed. When an activity becomes familiar, you respond quickly without overthinking. You trust your instincts because they are informed by practice. Fear often delays decisions, but repetition restores natural reaction. You move with clarity because your mind recognizes patterns. This confidence arises from familiarity, not from absence of challenge. Repetition strengthens emotional resilience. When you face a similar situation many times, you learn that discomfort passes. You no longer interpret temporary unease as a warning to retreat. Instead, you continue calmly. This resilience extends to other areas of life. Having learned you can adapt in one situation, you approach new experiences with less hesitation. Your brain generalizes confidence from repeated success. You also begin to notice details previously hidden by anxiety. When fear dominated your attention, you could not observe clearly. After repetition, your awareness expands. You recognize improvements, opportunities, and subtle cues. Familiarity sharpens perception. Instead of surviving the moment, you participate in it. This deeper engagement increases satisfaction and understanding. A performer once dreaded stepping on stage. After many performances, anticipation remained but changed quality. It became excitement rather than fear. The body still prepared energetically, yet the mind interpreted it differently. Repetition did not remove sensation, it changed meaning. What once signaled danger now signaled readiness. Experience reshaped interpretation. Repetition also reduces the need for external reassurance. Early attempts often require encouragement. Later, you rely on your own memory of success. Internal trust grows because you have experienced progress directly. You no longer depend on perfect conditions to feel capable. Familiarity becomes your support. Ultimately, repetition teaches that most fears are temporary reactions to unfamiliar situations. By returning consistently, you replace uncertainty with understanding. Each attempt adds calm to your response. The task itself stays the same, but your relationship to it changes completely. Through steady practice, fear fades naturally and leaves behind stable confidence grounded in experience. Chapter 10. Movement creates direction. Many people search for a clear life direction before they begin, believing certainty must appear first. They wait for a perfect plan, a strong sign, or a sudden feeling of readiness. Yet, direction rarely arrives in stillness, it appears while you are moving. When you take action, even without complete clarity, you gather information. You notice what feels meaningful and what does not. Without movement, you only have theories. The mind imagines many possible paths, but imagination cannot test them. Action turns possibility into experience. Each step gives feedback. Some steps confirm your interest, others redirect you. This process gradually shapes direction. Waiting for certainty keeps you in place, but moving forward reveals the path. Direction is not discovered from thinking alone. It is formed through participation. A young woman once worried about choosing the perfect career. She studied options for years, comparing outcomes and security. Every choice seemed risky, so she delayed deciding. Eventually, she accepted a temporary position simply to begin somewhere. While working, she learned which tasks energized her and which drained her. She met people, gained skills, and discovered interests she had never predicted. The job itself was not the final answer, but it revealed the next step. Without that movement, she would still be comparing possibilities. The direction appeared after action, not before it. Her path became visible only when she walked part of it. Movement provides clarity because real situations respond to you. When you act, you receive results immediately. You see consequences and opportunities. This information guides your next decision. Thinking alone cannot provide this feedback. The mind creates expectations, but reality adjusts them. You learn faster by doing than by analyzing endlessly. Each experience becomes a teacher. Even actions that do not work still give knowledge. You understand what to change. Direction grows from these corrections. The path refines itself step by step. Consider how travelers navigate unfamiliar roads. A person who stands still with a map cannot fully understand the route, but once they start walking, landmarks appear. They recognize turns, distances, and adjustments. If they take a wrong path, they correct it quickly. Standing still would not prevent mistakes, it would prevent arrival. Movement allows navigation. Life follows the same principle. You discover where to go by going somewhere first. There is also emotional clarity in movement. When you remain inactive, your thoughts multiply. You question your abilities and your choices. But once you engage, attention shifts to the present task. Doubt decreases because you are involved rather than imagining. You feel more certain, not because the future is guaranteed, but because you are participating in shaping it. Activity reduces mental confusion. You begin to trust the process instead of waiting for assurance. A man who wished to start a small business spent years planning every detail. He feared making a wrong choice. One day he began with a simple service on a small scale. The experience taught him what customers needed and what did not matter. His original plan changed completely. The direction he now followed was clearer than any design he had imagined. Movement created understanding. The business evolved through action rather than perfect preparation. Movement also builds confidence in decision-making. When you act regularly, you learn that adjustments are always possible. You stop fearing the first choice because you know it is not permanent. You can adapt. This flexibility removes pressure. You no longer need certainty before starting. You need only willingness to begin. Each action becomes a step, not a final commitment. Direction develops naturally through continued engagement. Another important effect is opportunity. Opportunities appear to those who are active because they are visible. When you participate, you meet people, encounter ideas, and notice possibilities. Inactivity hides these chances. They pass unnoticed because you are not present where they occur. Movement positions you where change happens. The world responds to engagement. Doors open through participation. There was a student unsure of interests who joined a community project simply to contribute. During the project, the student discovered a talent for organizing events. That skill led to further involvement and eventually a profession. The original intention was small, yet the result was significant. Without joining, the ability would have remained unknown. Movement revealed direction that reflection alone never showed. Movement also teaches patience. You realize progress unfolds gradually. You stop expecting immediate answers and start valuing gradual understanding. Each step matters, even if small. The path forms from many small decisions. This patience reduces frustration. You trust time because you see results accumulating. The future feels less overwhelming because you are already participating in it. Mistakes become guides rather than failures. When you move, you occasionally choose poorly, but these choices refine your path. You eliminate what does not fit and strengthen what does. Direction becomes clearer through contrast. The wrong steps are not wasted. They are informative. They narrow your focus and lead you closer to alignment. In the end, movement is the creator of direction. You do not need a perfect map to begin. You need willingness to take the first step. Each action teaches you where to place the next one. Over time, a path appears behind you and a clearer vision forms ahead. By acting, you transform uncertainty into understanding and possibility into progress. Sometimes people believe direction should feel certain and permanent from the beginning. They imagine a clear vision appearing all at once, guiding every decision perfectly. Yet real direction rarely works that way. It develops like a trail formed by repeated footsteps. Each time you move, you leave behind evidence of what worked and what did not. This evidence becomes guidance. Without movement, you have only questions. Your thoughts remain abstract because nothing tests them. Once you act, your mind receives concrete experience. You feel which activities sustain your attention and which drain it. The difference becomes obvious only through participation. Direction grows gradually because it depends on contact with reality. You do not discover your path by predicting it. You discover it by interacting with life until patterns reveal themselves naturally. There was a young student uncertain about personal interests. Instead of deciding immediately, the student joined several small activities, volunteering, assisting teachers, and helping organize events. None of these choices seemed permanent. Yet each experience revealed something new. Some tasks felt tiring, others felt energizing. Over time, a preference became clear. The student enjoyed guiding others and solving practical problems. This realization did not appear during reflection at home. It appeared during involvement. The direction emerged because the student allowed experience to teach. If the student had waited for certainty first, the answer would have remained hidden. Participation created understanding that thinking alone could not provide. Movement also reduces fear of wrong choices. When you act regularly, you learn that decisions are adjustable. You can shift, improve, and redirect. The first step does not lock your future. It begins exploration. Many people hesitate because they believe one decision defines everything. In truth, life responds continuously. You adapt as you learn. Movement reveals flexibility. You gain confidence because you understand you are not trapped by early actions. You are guided by them. Each step refines your awareness and leads to better choices later. Consider how an artist develops style. At the beginning, the artist experiments with many techniques. Some attempts fail, others succeed. Through repeated creation, preferences become clear. The artist recognizes patterns in what feels authentic. Style appears after many imperfect works, not before the first one. Without producing art, the artist could never discover this identity. The direction exists within the process itself. Creation shapes understanding. Another benefit of movement is increased awareness of opportunity. When you act, you encounter people and situations connected to your effort. These interactions reveal paths you never predicted. Opportunities rarely appear while waiting. They appear while you are involved. By participating, you place yourself where new possibilities exist. The world responds to visible effort. You become part of ongoing activity rather than an observer of it. A man once started exercising only to improve health. During regular visits to a community center, he met others with similar interests. Conversations led to organizing group activities. Over time, he became responsible for coordinating events. What began as a personal habit developed into leadership. This change occurred not because he planned it, but because he moved. His direction formed through engagement with real situations. Movement also strengthens intuition. With experience, you begin recognizing what suits you quickly. Decisions become clearer because you have references. You trust your judgment because it rests on lived situations rather than speculation. Intuition grows from repeated interaction with reality. The more you act, the more accurately you sense which direction aligns with you. There is also motivation in visible progress. When you see small results from your actions, you feel encouraged to continue. This encouragement replaces doubt. You stop wondering whether you are capable and start observing your improvement. Each result confirms that effort produces change. Direction then feels meaningful because you witness it unfolding. Sometimes movement leads away from what you expected. You may begin with one intention and discover another path suits you better. This is not a mistake. It is discovery. Without starting, you would never know. Changing direction becomes easier once you understand progress is not linear. Exploration is part of growth. Each experience adds clarity. A traveler walking through an unfamiliar city learns more by exploring streets than by studying maps alone. Turning corners, noticing landmarks, and interacting with people create understanding of the environment. The map becomes useful only after movement begins. Similarly, life plans gain meaning when supported by action. Experience transforms information into knowledge. Movement also builds patience with uncertainty. When you see direction forming gradually, you stop demanding immediate answers. You accept learning as a process. This acceptance reduces frustration. You trust that clarity will develop through continued effort. Each step contributes to a larger pattern. In the end, direction is not found before movement, but created by it. Every action teaches something valuable. Even small steps reveal insight. As you continue, confusion decreases and understanding grows. You realize the path was never hidden. It simply required walking long enough to become visible. Often, the greatest barrier to direction is the belief that you must understand the entire future before you begin. This belief keeps you waiting for a level of certainty that life never offers. When you remain still, your thoughts expand into endless possibilities. Each possibility competes with the others, and confusion grows. Movement simplifies this. The moment you act, possibilities narrow into reality. You are no longer comparing abstract paths. You are living one of them. This reduces mental noise. Instead of wondering who you might become, you start becoming someone through experience. Direction forms not from predicting your life, but from participating in it long enough to recognize what consistently draws your effort and attention. There was a young man, unsure whether he enjoyed teaching, design, or business. Instead of choosing immediately, he began helping a small community group with simple tasks. He organized schedules, designed small posters, and explained plans to volunteers. Through these repeated actions, he noticed one pattern. He felt most alive when explaining ideas and guiding others. The discovery surprised him because he had never predicted it. The path appeared only because he became involved. Had he waited for clarity first, he would still be undecided. Movement revealed the preference his mind could not identify alone. Movement also removes the illusion that decisions are final. When you act, you realize every step contains adjustments. You refine your approach as new information appears. The fear of choosing wrongly decreases because you see correction is always possible. Direction becomes a process rather than a single choice. Each experience informs the next. Instead of demanding a perfect beginning, you allow an evolving path. This mindset reduces pressure and encourages persistence. Imagine learning to navigate a river by boat. You cannot predict every current while standing on shore. Once you begin rowing, you feel the water's movement and adjust your course. The river guides your steering. Similarly, life guides your decisions when you are in motion. The environment responds to your effort, giving signals you could never observe from a distance. Movement increases awareness of your strengths. Through activity, you notice where effort feels natural and where it feels forced. These sensations reveal alignment. You begin choosing tasks that match your abilities because you have experienced them directly. Without action, you rely on assumptions. Experience replaces guessing with understanding. This understanding forms a stable sense of direction. A woman once began volunteering simply to fill free time. Over months, she realized she enjoyed listening to others' concerns and helping them find solutions. This repeated interaction led her to study counseling. Her future profession emerged from participation, not from a single decision. The movement showed her abilities she had never considered. Action also changes your relationship with uncertainty. You learn that uncertainty does not prevent progress. You continue moving even without complete knowledge. This builds resilience. Instead of waiting for reassurance, you rely on adaptability. Each step teaches that clarity appears gradually. You become comfortable discovering answers while moving. Direction grows clearer because movement reveals consequences. Some efforts produce satisfaction, others produce fatigue. You compare these reactions and adjust accordingly. Over time, a pattern forms. You naturally follow the activities that create engagement and leave behind those that do not. The path shapes itself through repeated feedback. A traveler exploring unfamiliar land finds meaningful places by walking, not by imagining them. Each step uncovers details, sounds, conversations, and opportunities. The traveler cannot predict which street matters until it is experienced. Likewise, your direction appears through lived moments. Experience shows significance more clearly than speculation. Movement also strengthens commitment. Once you invest effort, you care more deeply. Caring motivates continuation. You refine your actions because you value the process. This involvement deepens direction. It is no longer a distant idea but an active part of daily life. Your identity grows around your repeated efforts. Even setbacks contribute to guidance. When something does not work, you gain knowledge. You understand what to avoid and what to change. These corrections bring you closer to alignment. Without movement, you cannot learn from mistakes. Experience turns errors into instruction and sharpens your decisions. Ultimately, direction is not hidden somewhere waiting to be discovered. It develops through engagement. Each action becomes a signal showing where to step next. By continuing forward, you replace uncertainty with understanding. Over time, you recognize that the path formed because you walked it consistently, not because you predicted it perfectly. Fear does not always mean danger. Often it means you are approaching something new. The mind prefers certainty, so it tries to keep you in what is known, even if that place no longer helps you grow. When you keep postponing action, the situation stays the same and your confidence slowly weakens. But the moment you move, even in a small way, you interrupt that cycle and create evidence that you are capable. You do not need to eliminate fear to move forward. You only need to act while fear is still present. Each step teaches your mind that uncertainty is manageable and progress becomes less intimidating. Over time, hesitation becomes shorter and decisions become clearer. Your direction begins to form not from waiting, but from doing. What once felt impossible becomes normal, and you realize change was never blocked by the world, it was delayed by hesitation.